year, but it's really going to be based off of making sure that every year we have something exciting to roll out and that things are limited edition. So maybe 2018 we'll be revisiting the mana because we started this halfway through this year, so maybe we'll revisit mana in a different style, maybe different price points. I can tell you right now, the inlays are doing unbelievably well. Like we've got a $100 deck box and a $200 deck box, and the $200 deck boxes are outselling like 3 or 4 to 1. Because people, it's just, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, and it's, it's turquoise. The black mana symbol is actually crushed bone.
Oh,
it's really crazy.
Human bone?
I cannot confirm or deny that, but it is bone.
Now that's a black mage's dream right there. If you're a black mage, if you're a metal fan, you want the crushed bone.
Oh yeah, they're really, really sweet. So yeah, I'd love to do, in particular, the Ravnica guilds. I think people really identify with them. There's, you're a blue mage, but it's like, what kind of blue mage?
What spice do you bring?
Yeah, are you, stompy control? Are you more
bolt,
like
snap, bolt kind of person?
And I think the Shards of Alara are to a lesser degree.
Yeah. I mean, who walks around saying I'm teamer? What does teamer really embody?
The shards really. The
wedges. The shards. Yeah.
They embody kind of decks very well.
Yes.
But not necessarily the spirit behind the deck. So yeah, they definitely are on the table for us to work with in the future. And we've also got the Dungeons and Dragons license, so we'll be developing that over the next couple of months, getting that out. Certainly we want a full rollout for Christmas. We expect Christmas to be absolutely insane this year. It's just been doubling every year since we've started, so it's a lot to get ready for. Hey, I know Caleb. All right.
Now, what kind of a mage is Caleb? If you had to say what guild he was.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know him that well. I'm gonna decline to answer that.
Okay. He's a Misty Mage. Now, Ian, I don't know a heck of a lot about. I do know that he has top-8'd a challenge at TJ's Basement. He was then playing Valakut in Modern. Now I think he's playing Delver in Legacy, but in Modern he was a Valakut player.
Now, it looks like Caleb is on lands, which I believe was the case the last time I saw him.
Oh,
what you're looking for as a lands player is typically making sure that you have that early acceleration. Exploration is actually where you want to be. Mana Bond is in some of the lists. Let's take a look and see if he's running that. He does have a singleton Mana Bond. Believe it or not, Mana Bond really is, at best, Exploration number 5.
Okay.
If you could run 5 Exploration, you likely would. You really only need to be putting down like 2 lands a turn. The exception to that is when you could have like a first turn Merit Lage. And that can happen with Mana Bond. But more often than not, you don't want to be discarding all of your non-land cards, particularly post-board. Post-board, you've got a lot of different cards that you'd be interested in kind of getting out on turn 3 or 4. And that makes it really tough to do. So he's got double Exploration.
Wow.
Let's see what he's got here. He's going to need some type of Life from the Loam engine going soon, or those Explorations are just going to be sitting there.
Right now, this is a good draw if there was a Loam or if there was a gamble. Right now, he's hellbent. He has the Punishing Fire, but not the Grove. He has the Wasteland, but not the Loam. And the Thespian Stage, but not the Dark Depths.
Oh, interesting here. So he decides to go ahead and cut the mana off. That is a decision. I mean, you could also hold back and then Thespian Stage to copy the Wasteland the next turn.
Oh, interesting.
So we'll see. He's really banking on Ian being totally land screwed here, which he may have read it correctly.
Did he scoop?
He did scoop. Morale broken.
Wow, Ian does not mess around. He says, I have a dinner date. If I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose. And he scoops it up. I mean, Caleb was hellbent. Caleb just could have drawn another Exploration and then another land and a crop, not a crop rotation, but man, an aggressive scoop by Ian.
Yeah, I mean, it may prove to be correct. It really depends on, what type of build of Grixis he's running. I mean, he does have Tarmogoyf, which is able to stand up against the Punishing Fire engine, so tough to say if that was correct. Based off of the fact that he does have some threats that are resilient against it, it's a tough one.
Now, that does prevent some information going to Caleb, right? Caleb
Yes.
now doesn't. The only thing Caleb knows is his underground seat Delver. He could be the young Pyromancer deck. He could be a 2-color deck, a 1. I mean, he could be anything with Delver's secrets. But looking at his list, we know that he's kind of a mid-rangey deck. Tarmogoyf, 1 Leovold, 1 True Name, 4 Hymn to Torok. I don't know how I'd classify this deck. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it looks a lot like the Shardless list of old, but just walking away from Shardless as so many people have and kind of loading up on some of the more good stuff that you might hope to flip. Cards like Dimir Charm are terrible with Shardless Agent, so you can actually play something like that and just have access to this powerful multicolored spell.
Daze as well, terrible with Shardless.
Absolutely. So, and for him to Torok, you've got the redundancy there where you're going to see them more. Usually the Shardless list kind of ran like 3 copies of that card, just because you have so much more access to it. So yeah, I think it may have been the correct play. I mean, we were certainly talking earlier about tournament management. Lands is the type of deck that can go really long, so that may end up being correct.
Now, for those of you watching at home who haven't been paying attention to the Legacy format in the past few years, 4 or 5 years, the lands deck is something really special. The printing of Life from the Loam about 10 or 12 years ago enabled a lot of different strategies, and it took years for those people to find those strategies. But this deck plays 30-something lands usually. The number changes, but it plays 4 Exploration and a Mana Bond, so 5 ways to play extra lands. 4 Mox Diamond, kind of redundancy, lets you discard lands to make what ends up being extra land drops. 4 Life from the Loam, and 4 Gamble. So Gamble goes to find Life from the Loam most of the time. The other times it finds a specific land that you need when you have the Loam, or maybe an Exploration. And 4 Crop Rotation. And then it plays a lot of mini combos with its lands, such as the one that kills, Thespian Stage, and the Tabernacle, the Dark Depths.
Dark Depths, yep.
What other land combos could it play?
Well, you have Grove of the Burn Willows, which plays very well with Punishing Fire. It is debatably just better than Taiga in a lot of ways. That engine is very, very punishing, pun intended, versus decks that are trying to use Deathrite Shaman and Delver's Secrets. If you can keep ahead of their Deathrite Shamans, there's very little that they can do to catch up.
Okay.
Of course, if they get their Deathrite Shamans on board first, then it becomes very tricky, because now you're trying to return them in response to activations and trying to kind of play this very interesting waiting game, which lands is kind of set up to do. You also have access to Ghost Quarter, so after you wasteland out your opponent of all of their non-basics, you can actually start to chip away at their basic lands as well, and Tabernacle really keeps that mana tied up, trying to keep their creatures on board. Glacial Chasm is a very interesting card in the deck. Versus decks without Reach, you can actually Glacial Chasm every single turn with Exploration, because you're able to play more than 1 land each turn, making it so they can effectively never do additional damage to you. The only way they're going to be able to break that up is with a Wasteland of their own, and if they do have that, then you still have an additional trump with your Crop Rotation, where you can Crop Rotate, go get a Thespian Stage, and then copy your Glacial Chasm. So there's a lot that they have to go through to be able to break through that lock. It is very difficult if you're not running Burn.
But, on the other side of the board, this is exactly what Ian wants, an early threat, be it Deathrite or Delver. Not sure which is better, but he'll settle for either one. He has to pressure Caleb early, for sure.
And he's certainly on his way. Caleb down to 14, about to go down to 11 if he doesn't have that removal in his hand, and the Wasteland getting rid of that Maze of Ith. Delver really does want to be chipping away at the life total every turn. It's about pressure, it's about inevitability, and where the inevitability lies in the matchup. Punishing Fire would be worth dazing here, probably worth forcing, just because of how bad the long game is when you're trying to win with insects versus a deck with so much removal. And we don't see a Grove of the Burn Willows yet either.
Right. And here is the Force of Will. We see the new printing. Maybe Ian has just gotten into Legacy. I see the new printing Wasteland, new printing of Force. It's nice to see players getting into Legacy. There are more affordable versions of these cards out there. You don't need to spend $4,000 on a Legacy deck.
And Surgical, good timing for that, but he does have 2 Tireless Trackers. That card could threaten to take the game over here. Tireless Tracker is a very popular sideboard option for lands. It fills a lot of roles. It's an alternative win condition. A lot of the time your Dark Depths combo is vulnerable to cards like Surgical Extraction, Pithing Needle, different ways of the combo getting shut down, which you really don't want to try and answer necessarily. Sometimes it's better to just win a different way. It also lets you draw a ton of cards with your Clue Stones, and those Clue Stone activations are a great way to get your Life from the Loam out of the graveyard in response to an effect like Surgical Extraction. So it really does tie things together very nicely, and of course it grows quickly, and the deck has no shortage of landfall triggers.
That's the truth. Usually, I have to imagine with the Tireless Tracker, you'll have more clues than you know what to do with. More clues than you have mana to activate them. So, for specific lands that we see in Caleb's hand, Dark Depths is going to start with 10 counters, needs a Thespian Stage to unlock its potential, a couple fetch lands, and the land that everyone fears when they go to assemble the lands deck, the Tabernacle.
Looks like an Italian one, the darker printing.
Yep.
For a long time, the Italian ones were not a particularly expensive card, but this deck really changed the face of that. It is a very expensive card right now.
You absolutely have to have one, right?
Oh yeah, it is completely necessary for the deck, at least one. I'm a fan of just one. I actually don't like playing 2, given that it's legendary, and you do have so much access to recursion. So upkeep, we have a click.
Yep, the Vendilion is not only for Modern. This allows Ian to take any spell from Caleb's hand, or honestly, I think is more likely just leave the hand as it is, because if you bin the Exploration, you threaten to draw Caleb into a card that can deal with the creatures. Maybe like a Kozilek's Return.
This is a very dicey setup, so that Exploration would allow him to play the Tabernacle and another land. If he draws a Wasteland here, that could be very brutal. He could Wasteland the opposing Wasteland, protecting that Tabernacle, and then start chipping away at the mana base, possibly making it so Tabernacle actually starts killing those creatures.
Oh, I see.
I am much more afraid of Exploration here than a Tireless Tracker.
Right, now if he had one tracker, that's a whole nother story, but 2 trackers, Caleb could just play a replacement.
Well, Tracker's not going to be able to really do anything defensive-wise. Both of these creatures have evasion, and there's a Ghost Quarter. Now, is Ian playing any basics? Let's take a look. Whoa, this is like the worst-case scenario I was talking about.
Yeah, not a single basic in Ian's deck.
Hits the Wasteland.
Oof.
Oh, no. Oh, no, why would you do that? Oh, I guess he wants to waste... Ugh. Well, he has to pay the 1.
Yeah, he absolutely has to. This Wasteland, I don't think, can activate targeting Tabernacle.
It'd leave him landless.
Right.
I guess, I mean, it definitely gives him a chance to make a decision.
So he'll save one of his 3 power flying creatures and just hope that for 3 draw phases, Caleb bricks out on land.
Yeah, I guess I don't really like leaving the Wasteland there, because when he rips a land, then he's going to be able to Wasteland the Tabernacle and just keep the other land around.
Yeah, that's a heads up statement, because look, he rips Trop here. Brings Caleb to 8. Now, Caleb does have the opportunity to slam his tracker, but using those 2 fetch lands brings him to 6, which is 2 turns only for the Delver.
He's going to have to draw. I mean, those Clue Stones drawing towards a Mazavith is going to be really important. And again, that Wasteland is a real problem.
Right.
Mazavith could be an out were it not for that Wasteland.
Just a correction for everyone at home. I do believe that Caleb is up 1-0. I don't think this is game 3. Crucible of Worlds. That's a hell of a draw.
Interesting.
Now, he's already played both his lands.
Yeah, that is not a typical sideboard card for the list, and that is going to be extremely powerful here. He's going to be able to get rid of 2 lands. If Ian does not have another land,
Tabernacle off the board. Honestly, a little premature from Ian, because now a resolved Mazavith means the insectile aberration is blanked.
well, he's dead. He's going to play Tabernacle and Ghost Quarter, and that's that. That insect is bye-bye.
Yeah.
This has stabilized.
The Tabernacle could have been killed during the end step.
When we're done, I would like to host Snapcasters if he gets done before us.
Yeah, this is graphic at this point. Crucible is going to allow 2 lands per turn to be coming back. Now, he probably doesn't have any more fetchable lands. They usually only run 3 forests, 2 taigas.
Yep.
Yeah, so those are not really the issues, but I mean, he's got Wasteland, Ghost Quarter. Those are relevant.
Yep, Ian will play it out, though.
He's got his Tireless Tracker, so those fetch lands also can produce multiple clues just by playing them.
There's Clue. There's Clue. And really,
Yeah, he'll just be able to start drawing cards here.
you know, Eric, I have a feeling we may be going to our backup feature in a moment.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about Tireless Tracker here is it's gonna allow him to win the game without having to assemble the combo. Things
Right.
were kind of a train wreck, and it'll work. So here you can fetch in response, and then Wasteland it as well. No basics out of this Grixis Delver list.
A little greedy in deck building, not to include a single basic.
Yeah, very common though for Grixis Delver. That's my biggest criticism of the list. I do have it together with no basics, and I have drops and matches to Blood Moon that felt very winnable, but just got completely blanked by a single card. I do enjoy the 4-color control lists that run some basics, especially the Grixis variants. So under Blood Moon, you can have a swamp, an island, or 2, and then the rest of them are mountains, and the deck can actually function. It's just not the type of card that you want to just auto lose to.
Right.
And same with Wasteland. You don't want to just auto lose to Wasteland.
Now, kind of amusing in this game, Caleb forgot his Tabernacle trigger, so Tireless Tracker did die, prolonging this game a little bit.
Yeah, I think for the most part that's all because he's so far ahead that there's like no way he can lose.
Yeah, you can't blame Caleb here. Ian could draw just about any card legal in Legacy, and it would not matter.
Yeah, the only thing that it's not in his list, but if he had Lightning Bolt, he could draw land Lightning Bolt, but that's not a possibility.
Right.
And still, the trump of crop rotation for Glacial Chasm would probably eventually come around here.
So we're just a shot away here. Dark Depths, there we go. Dark Depths, Thespian stage. He will give Ian one more draw step. Please, Caleb, don't forget the Tabernacle trigger again for an indestructible 2020.
Oh, it's okay because it just destroys it.
Oh, it does.
You can
It
totally
doesn't
forget
sacrifice
it. No, it doesn't.
Oh, wow.
No, I suppose if you ever wanted to troll someone really hard, you could pretend that you didn't know that.
You heard it here first.
Give them a glimmer of hope and then smack it down.
Eric Dupuis supports trolling in 2017.
Ulamog's the same thing. That was actually in the 12 post list. That was a particularly unfortunate interaction for people when they get all excited about the trigger. Like, nope. All right, here we go. He's fetching the Bayou. Gonna put out maybe a Deathrite Shaman.
Well, Wasteland, yeah.
Doesn't even have priority. He's jumping all over it.
There's the shake.
Yeah, that was a classic example of just really stabilizing, where your life total no longer matters. You have complete control over the board. And that was without the punishing fire. That was all on the back of how strong Tabernacle is. Just getting rid of all of his lands with the Crucible instead of Life from the Lung.
Talk about destruction. Ian's done. He may just go to Moose Loot right now and sell all his Magic cards. Obviously, I'm kidding. He's having a good time. 4-2, still a respectable record. He'll make some cash.
Absolutely. No, it's a solid list, but that is a known issue with it, where your mana base is it's your strength and your weakness. You know, it's the Turbo Xerox mentality of really low mana and jamming Wastelands in there. But in the same sense, when somebody can effectively knock those lands down, you're really hurting. And that's nowhere is it stronger than a deck like Lands, where they can also play additional lands. So they're knocking your mana down and developing their mana. It's different. You know, if you get out a Delver and a Deathrite, maybe a Tarmogoyf, and you're playing against a deck like, say, Goblins, where they're like using their mana to do that instead of committing to the board. But Lands is in a different level because they're continuing their game plan while they're tripping you up. It's like trying to do a sprint, and it's against two people. One of them's tackling you, the other one's just slowly walking toward the finish line.
Lands is in such a good spot, and I love watching the deck run. The only thing that stops me from thinking about putting it together is this one card. Now, this is really the problem with the reserve list. Singleton cards double a deck's price. Is there any solution? Can we do anything besides shell out 1,000 for Tabernacle?
You know, I don't know if it's truly a problem given the track record.
Okay.
I would let me give you two possible paths that Magic could be on, and which one you think sounds preferable. You could head down a path where you have cards like Tabernacle, which may be whatever the price of the market is. If it's a $1,000 card, if it's a $2,000 card, and it will continue to appreciate year over year at a steady amount. So you're kind of getting a solid return on your investment, and you know it's high enough price. Or we go in a different direction where you have a card like that is going to continually go down in value. Like, which one of those paths sounds healthiest to you?
Well, I like it if this is going up in price, but at the same time, Magic is always as popular as it's ever been. What if Magic becomes less popular and my investment doesn't appreciate year after year? I think that's the worry for a lot of people.
I just look at it as the card being on sale. I totally understand that that's the way people look at it. I'm just very much a contrarian when it comes to investing. I love Bitcoin. I think it's like I actually give out Bitcoin like Bibles. When people ask me about it, I have them set up a wallet and I give them a couple of dollars in Bitcoin. I really look at stuff like this as a solid investment that over time takes care of the people that are invested in it, and it also just organically gets the cards to the people who want them. Because you know what, when Tabernacle's $1,000 and somebody's getting out of the game, well, now that card ends up with somebody who is in the game. You don't just sit on that for no reason. Like, when you have a Magic collection that's worth $50,000, you're not just going to stuff it in a closet if you decided you're not going to play Magic anymore. You're going to sell that, you're going to get your value back out, you're going to go do whatever else you want with it, and then that ends up in the hands of someone else. And that's mostly how it works, and that's what I've done for the last 20 years is, you know, people are getting out of the game, I'm taking their entire collection. I'm one of the few people in the area that is able to handle that type of volume.
So let me paraphrase. You support selling your house and buying Tabernacles. Is this true?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yes, let's advocate that. You'd probably be fine. Okay. However, the caveat is I recommend doing that 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, the Tabernacle is a church, right? So you could sleep in the church.
If you have enough of them, you could build a nice little house of cards. It'd be really be great. I really think the play for Legacy is to get the duels, the fetches, the forces, the wastelands. I think, just slowly set aside some money, and then once a month or whatever is kind of at a low point, just go there. But I would recommend moving forward every month. You know what I mean? Just keep going. I'm not a big fan of trying to time things, of trying to be like, oh, I'm going to get everything all at once when it goes down.
It doesn't work, does it?
It really doesn't. So you keep moving forward, you pick stuff up, and then incrementally you can just move away from proxy territory into a fully, functional sanctioned deck, and just make sure you're having fun the whole time. Find a store that supports Legacy. Find a group that you can play test with proxy cards. I do not in any way endorse the counterfeit cards that are being sold as proxies. I think those are a terrible decision for people. I think it opens you up to all sorts of liabilities with fraud. Those cards, if they had on the back a gold border, if they had the name of the printing press, if they had any number of things that would eliminate it from being something that could be used for deceitful purposes, I wouldn't care. Put a silver border on there. Doesn't matter. Fine, you get a nice playtest copy. But the fact that they are structured in a way which is kind of meant to deceive people, I would rather people just play with Post-it notes on their cards than use that. But if you just move in that direction, I mean, it's always been expensive. That's all I can really say is the most expensive decks in the game have always been expensive. It's just now it has, to a degree, shifted away from Vintage toward Legacy in terms of the format where the most Eternal players are. It used to be Vintage was the Eternal format. They did a lot to damage that. They restricted Brainstorm. They really did a number on the format, and it's slowly been building back up. And the reason Vintage is what it is now is I credit the community more than the card pool and the management of the list.
Right.
It's a very tight-knit community. I just think getting those staples will allow you to play pretty much whatever you want with minimal further investment. You want to build Storm, it's like, okay, well, you can go out and you can get your LEDs. You want to build a control deck, you can buy a couple Jace the Mind Sculptor. It's really, you want the optionality. You don't want to just get locked into a single deck.
Sure.
Unless it's a super budget deck, like Affinity. Like that was, at the time when I was recommending that, it was such an inexpensive deck that you could build it for like $200, and that was that. But now you're pretty much investing in cards that are good across multiple formats.
Now, neither of these players are on Affinity here. Brandt is on the play. He opened on Gitaxian Probe into Cabal Therapy, Versamulda 6, discarding 2 Swords to Plowshares. Ben fired back with a Pithing Needle. We will find out in a sec what that needle named. I do believe we have the deck list, so let's grab those and take a look.
Delver.
Deathrite.
Naming Deathrite Shaman. Totally reasonable thing to name. Alright, so
Next one's Delta.
that's for Pluto Delta?
Okay, so Pluto Delta versus Deathrite Shaman. So Benjamin's name is Deathrite, Grant's name's Delta. Hey, look at that. He knew about it thanks to the Cabal Therapy. That wasn't a random name.
It's a very interesting board state from Benjamin. You'd think, based off of basic planes, 2 Swords to Plowshares in the graveyard, he'd be on some type of heavy white strategy. The fetch lands betray that it's not Death and Taxes, but in reality, he's actually on a Esper-colored list here. He's got Snapcasters, Stoneforges, Baleful Strix, Lingering Souls. This is a classic Esper control list right here.
I would call this list Dump Truck, named after Ben Rubin's strategy with Vindicates in this deck, but that's ancient history. Esper Control is probably a little more accurate.
The 3 Stoneforge Mystics are going to be able to get Jite, Batterskull, and what those will do is turn all of those Lingering Soul tokens into Stone Cold Killers themselves. You really do not want spirits running around holding Jites. That's going to make it really tough to win with opposing creatures, all of them except True Name Nemesis. And that's going to be something he has to answer or scoop up for the next game.
Yep, that was quick. So it looks like Ben and Grant played about a, 20-25 minute game 1, which the Esper Control deck won. They played a 2-minute game 2, which Grant won.
Lightning Bolt gave him some extra reach there. This is a very kind of traditional looking Delver list. It does run 2 True Name Nemesis along with a 2 Gurmag Angler and 2 Young Pyromancer. So his kind of bigger threats are really dispersed across 3 different angles of attack. And then, of course, he has the 4 Delver and the 4 Deathrite. Pretty much all of the Delver strategies at this point are really in agreement that that's where they want to be. They're essential 4-ubs for all the aggro blue decks right now. He's got Gataxian Probe as a 3-of, found room for 3 Stifles as well,
Wow.
and a Spell Pierce and a Dismember. So a little extra removal. That Dismember is an interesting card. A lot of the time you see people running cards like Forked Bolt,
Okay.
1 red sorcery from Rise of the Eldrazi. It was recently reprinted as well. And that can do 1 and 1. Very good at killing Snapcaster plus Young Pyromancer or any number of solid 1 toughness things, but it can also kill a Deathrite. And it's, of course, great with your own Snapcaster mages in the higher curve decks. But here he decides to stay lower to the curve and keep a 1-mana Dismember. Can let him handle some things that Lightning Bolt can't. Germ tokens, Gurmag Anglers. Those are both solid targets for that.
I like that. Throughout the weekend, both in Modern yesterday and in Legacy today, not a lot of players have had efficient answers to Gurmag Angler. Like, it seems so silly, a 5/5 for 7, but as it turns out, having converted mana cost to 7, having 5 toughness has been really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting that Gurmag crowded out Tasigur so quickly.
Yeah.
Tasigur, in a vacuum, is a vastly superior card. The 1-turn clock shift from 4 to 5 turns based off of 4 to 5 power really isn't the issue. The issue is opposing Gurmag Anglers.
Oh.
Like, he just can't get in the way of them.
Right.
And the 4-mana ability really doesn't, when you're getting beaten down 5 a turn by the opposing Gurmag, you really don't have time to mess around with that. So Gurmag is essentially a 1-mana 5/5, and you better have an answer.
We see Ben here going to Paris. He's taking a mulligan. 6 cards, not really a huge deal unless the same thing happened in game 1 where he gets probed into double Cabal Therapy, discarded 2 cards. That was pretty brutal. As long as he has some lands and spells, he should be able to compete. I mean, Lingering Souls is just such a beastly card.
Yeah, Lingering Soul's very strong against Delver. It is a little tough when you're talking about decks that run discard and counters being down a card. When you're trying to trade 1 for 1, that is where that starts to be punishing. But he does have some real trumps in there. Supreme Verdict, if he can get to the 4 mana, is going to be just a blowout card for the Delver deck.
Yep, he does have access to 2 of those after sideboarding. It doesn't matter how many Pyromancer tokens you have. Verdict kills them all.
Yeah, the best case scenario in a matchup like that is when your opponent has been sculpting their hand towards a fistful of counters. Oh, here we go. Probe really giving him information about how he wants to play this.
Yeah. Amazing he only has 3 Gataxian Probe.
Yeah, I mean, he did need to make some room for stuff like Stifle, Spell Pierce, and the 5th removal spell in Dismember, so something's got to go.
Yep. He sees a hand of Brainstorm and a Fetch, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Swords to Plowshares, and Pithing Needle. So a powerful Planeswalker, a removal spell, and a Hand Sculptor. As far as 6-card hands go, that's pretty good.
Yeah, Supreme Verdict tends to really have a lopsided effect when people are unaware of it and they've sculpted their hand toward answers. So they can they've committed to the board, they're brainstorming back additional threats because they've got the board locked up with True Name Nemesis and other threats, and then you just wipe them all out and they're left with a fistful of counters, and there's really not a lot they can do to recommit to the board from there. At that point, they're hoping to draw a threat, and you're able to just continue to follow on your game plan. You can start playing cards like Lingering Souls, which you're very happy if they're going to try and counter 1/2 of that card.
Or use a removal spell on 1/4 of that card.
Yeah, it is the deep end of the pool at that point.
So Ponder shuffles, picks up a Daze off the top for Grant, but Daze can't really counter the Brainstorm.
Main phase, Brainstorm, Fetch.
Be putting back at least one of these 2 lands, I'd have to imagine. Maybe a Pithing Needle. as well. Not sure really what the needle is meant to name in this matchup besides Deathrite.
I'd imagine just entirely Deathrite. It's a extremely important card in the matchup. It gives range. You can't really stabilize against it with Lingering Souls tokens. You can try and race it, but you certainly can't stop them from continuing to chip away at your life total.
He does get value out of the days, setting himself back to 0 lands, though. So while he does have a Deathrite Shaman, this is not ideal. This isn't turn 1 Shaman on the play territory. This is 1 land versus 2, and you're saying go.
Moving toward a Jace the Mind Sculptor on Ben's side.
Oh, ugly. That is one of the ugliest brainstorms I've ever seen. Finds no shuffle effect.
He's got at least a 3rd land. Sword of Fire and Ice.
But no way to produce white mana. Benjamin Brandt has the basic island and the basic swamp, but fetching these lands has made it so he can't cast his Swords to Plowshares.
Looks like a Dread of Night there.
Grant overloaded on answer cards right now. He has Dread of Night and Ancient Grudge. And 3 Brainstorms, so this isn't the fastest hand.
And Delver does look to change that dimension. I mean, he can start hitting for 5 a turn here.
Will it be enough? Can it race True Name on the other side of the battlefield? Maybe backed up by a Sword of Fire and Ice.
How he taps his mana now is crucial. If he walks away from Ancient Grudge mana at the wrong time, then True Name Nemesis could really mop things up. Luckily for him, this turn, that is not the case, and he's very far away from Supreme Verdict mana. He needs 2 additional white to make that happen.
Yeah, I have to question not going to fetch a white source. It turns out that Grant does have a Wasteland this game, but the lack of white mana is going to hurt. Life total is 14 to 16 in favor of Ben, for a second at least.
Really pinning down mana. I disagree with that play. I really like to see players wait for the activation of the Sword of Fire and Ice and tax him that extra 2 mana as well.
Right.
There's no way he's not going to equip that. He was really playing around Force of Will that he drew during his main phase, or during his draw step, but you can still flash back the Ancient Grudge if need be. That could have been a nice time walk turn.
In for 3. Grant attempts to make Ben lose 2 life, but in response, Ben will get a white source and attempt to Swords to Plowshares one of the creatures. We'll see which one. And this would be a way different game if Ben had tried to play around Daze with that Pithing Needle. If he hadn't walked into the Daze. Not saying it's the wrong play, just pointing that out.
Yeah, it is entirely possible. The True Name gets dazed instead, but I do completely agree that a Pithing Needle on board here would make those Death Rites very underwhelming.
So life total is 10 to 14 now. Brainstorm number 3.
Yeah, those lightning bolts are very threatening. This is going to actually allow him to be casting them without compromising the Deathrite Shamans. That extra range is very problematic here.
Grant Fishman maybe just an untap away from earning his way into the top 8 of this Legacy tournament. This is the last round.
I don't think I've ever had to Swords to Plowshares my own true name nemesis, but he may be in that range here.
Dubious achievement unlocked right there.
Yeah, this very much looks like an end-stepped bolt, untap, and he could be dead before his draw step.
All right, Swords to Plowshares. But unless Ben has some kind of counterspell here, this should be it.
Misdirection is really where he wants to be. Oh, he's got the Cabal Therapy. What a good sport. Didn't flash back to Cabal Therapy. Let's get those Jaces out of there just in case there was any doubt.
Yep. Grant Fishman moves on to the top 8 of this Titanium Legacy Challenge. Congrats to Grant. He had to do it the hard way. He had to play out the last round.
Yeah, that seemed to be another example of the lower curve really paying off. He was able to do a lot with 1-mana creatures, 1-mana spells like Lightning Bolt, whereas really on the other side, True Name Nemesis, Sword of Fire and Ice, like those, kind of slower cards just did not have the time to be able to generate the effect that they need to make them worth their mana cost.
We saw there Jace the Mind Sculptor. He held 2 at the end of the game. Never found the 4th land. So is Legacy just purely the domain of 1-mana spells?
I mean, that's certainly why Chalice is so powerful, and that's the balancing act. I played Death Shadow this past weekend in a smaller weekly event at Scholars, and running up against Chalice, it became very clear what type of trade-off you're making, where every single threat except for the 2 Gurmag Anglers were shut off. You got 4 Deathrite, 4 Delver, 4 Death Shadow.
Wow.
It's tough to deal with.
Hardcast the Street Wraith, maybe?
This version doesn't run it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Legacy version does not run it because you get Snuff Out as well.
Oh, wow.
For creature removal.
That's
so
a nice
it's
card.
4 life. Yeah, it's a spicy list, but I would say that is a real trade-off that you're making is getting really blanked by that Crucible, by that Chalice of the Void. So kind of any strategy for the most part will be making trade-offs. When you really move all in a certain direction, there tends to be a deck that can emerge that can really punish it.
Right.
And it's just a question of how crystallized does the metagame get. In Vintage in years past, we saw Gushless really solidify as being like 25% of the metagame, but then we also saw workshop decks that were designed to defeat those decks.
Okay.
And they became about 25% of the metagame, and then 50% was everybody else doing their other stuff and just kind of dealing with these 2 juggernauts smashing each other. I think to a degree we kind of have that here in Legacy. It's just the Chalice side of things hasn't really been embraced as much. It's still fairly fringe. Cards like Chalice and Blood Moon are very, very powerful, but you don't see as many players coming out and forced to use them. And I think part of that has to do with kind of the fun nature of the format. I think if the Legacy Pro Tour element that they've recently announced may change that. I think the fact that it's going to be a standard, a Legacy, and a Modern player all on the same team, I think that will really change things, and there'll be more brain power put on it. And I would not be surprised if Chalice starts to show up and really shut down a lot of the strategies that seem so much better than everything else. And it's like, unless this.
What a fun card, huh? Chalice of the Void.
It really just blanks it off. The fun thing about it in person, too, is, and it won't be as good on, say, the Pro Tour, but there are a lot of kind of mind tricks that you can do to get stuff through Chalice.
I've been mind tricked many times.
I really enjoy. I'll give away like a major secret here. When you use slang, you're using a different part of your brain to
Okay.
try and understand what somebody's talking about. So like this past Wednesday, I really wanted to win with Death Shadow. I wanted the cash. And I don't always break out these tricks, but I was playing against a Chalice, and I had a Pithing Needle. He had a Stoneforge Mystic in his deck. And I put out Pithing Needle, and I was like, I'm going to have to try and stop that because I had seen the Stoneforge. So I'm like, I'm going to have to try and stop that, to which he's trying to process, and he's like, so you're naming Stoneforge?
Oh, the magic sentence right there.
Yep. So I
Yeah.
was like, yes, I am. But it was
Gotcha.
just because you're dealing in a different way. Same with Gataxian Probe. If you play Gataxian Probe and you're like, let's see what's going on over there, they've got to process what that slang means.
Wow.
So like, there's things you can do if you're really playing to win.
Yeah.
Which I'm skeptical would work on the Pro Tour, but
Sure.
against your average player, it just takes them out of that element where it's like Gataxian Probe, this 1 mana spell. You don't want to announce it like that. It's just what you got.
Exactly. I got Vault Scourge. My opponent, or I had a Chalice on 2. My opponent cast Vault Scourge for only 1 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah, exact same thing. So right now we have an interview here.
All right.
I'm going to step out of the booth and let you talk to Grant Fishman about his Delver deck. Yeah. Say hi for me.
How's it going, Grant? Come on in. Congratulations.
Hey, how you
Hey,
doing?
good. So fairly stock list, very similar to a list I had been running a couple months back after Counterbalance went. But I noticed that you managed to fit in 3 Stifles. How have those been for you?
So I felt like Stifle was really good when the format was still developing after the top ban, just because a lot of people are trying out new stuff. There are a lot of 4-color variants coming out with like Leovold and trying to run Noble Hierarchs or whatever. I haven't seen a whole lot of that nowadays, so I think I'm going to start. I might go down on Stifles. I don't know. But at least for this tournament, I felt like Stifle was probably the way to go, just because it's a smaller tournament. I have minimal experience with deck recently, and Stifle gets you the most free wins. I had a lot of experience with Grixis Delver on Noah Walker's list, about a year ago, which was one of the first Legacy decks I became like relatively proficient with. But yeah, I decided I went to Shardless for a while, did pretty well with that. I still don't think so. This is sort of a personal opinion of mine, but I think Shardless is still a very live deck, and I think a lot of people think that the deck has sort of been dying down because it had, the primary sort of explanation that I've been given is that Miracles was a good matchup, and that's just not true. And they were like, oh, your best matchup left the format, or like there are a lot of True Names running around. And while True Name is an issue, I think that Shardless is still like a very viable deck. But I decided to go on to Grixis Delver today, especially because I feel like over the course of playing, I've just characteristically been running into a lot of combo in the New England area, and I've been having a lot of trouble with that out of Shardless. I run like 3 Hymn to Torok, and I felt like Stifle was just the way to get there in those matches. So I don't know, I really like running 3 Git Probe. Running 4 Git Probe can be really burdensome in some matches, although it does, and I have the Cabal Therapy package on the board, which used to be my go-to.
So on that note, you've kind of diversified your top end threats. Delver and Deathrite are kind of untouchable, but then you have 6 other threats. How did you come up with the 2-2-2 split? Is that just because you want a lot of different angles? Is that just kind of like you don't feel that you could support more of any of those? How do you come down on that?
Well, currently the list running around, or the current list that has like the most 5-0s on Moto is the Louis CBR lists. And he runs the 2-2-2 stock list, and I really like that because I think a lot of the time there are matchups where, this is a fairly like niche scenario, but when I'm casting a Force of Will and I want to be able to pitch, like I already have like a Delver or a Deathrite, and I want something to pitch, and I want to pitch a True Name, but it's a matchup where True Name's really, really good. I don't want to just be like, locked out of casting True Name for the rest of the game. And I feel like True Name is just a way better threat than Young Pyromancer right now. Just because it's a lot more resilient. But if you play Young PZ correctly, which I like to think I do most of the time, it can definitely be a lot of pressure that's very hard to deal with. But I definitely like the 2 True Names. It's sort of like the top end of the deck in a way. It's just like the card you tap out for, and just like when you're sort of stabilized, and you play the resource denial game hopefully with the Stifles especially, and you feel comfortable enough using your resources to just sort of take a turn off, and in that way, it actually makes for a really decent board out. So in a lot of matches like Storm or like turn 1 combo variants, most of your threats I feel like you want to be committing most of your threats to the board for like 1 or less mana. You can, not that there's anything with 0 CMC in the deck, but in a way that I feel like tapping out for True Name in those matches, you just almost never have the availability of being able to do that. And I actually value having like slots in the deck that are very easy to board with, to like utilize with your board, just because I feel like it sort of gives you, so with the Stifles you just have a lot of play game 1. You have like it's very, very hard to beat game 1. Stifle is a very hard card to beat game 1, especially if you're on the play. And I just felt like being able to have that level of aggression game 1 allowed you to sort of have a little bit of a more flexible threat slot, or with the 1 Dismember and the 1 Spell Pierce, you can just sort of throw those around, and they're good here, they're good there, but they're sometimes just dead, and it makes for just a really easy board plan. And I feel like it's easy enough to utilize those slots while also not diluting the deck's potential, which I feel like that happens sometimes.
And for the sideboard, are there any cards that you felt have really been MVPs? Anything that you tested out that you weren't really thrilled with? There's a lot of kind of classic legacy cards on the list here. Anything that's been overperforming or underperforming?
Grim Lavamancer has been really underperforming for me. I think it was just like the tournament, but I would bring it in against. I played against a couple of Stoneblade variants and a lot of Lingering Souls, and I would just bring in like whatchamacallit, the Dread of Night, which I think was a little weird, but I guess it stops a Stoneforge from getting suited up with a Jit, so I figured that was an upside. And that Dread of Night actually it didn't come down a whole lot, but I felt like it was a very, very strong board position, because at one point in my last match I had it in my hand and I was pretty much like gonna get toasted in a lot of points by just like cast a Lingering Souls. So I was really using it as sort of my answer for that. So even it was so good I didn't have to cast it. But it was one of those reactive. It was a reactive spell, even though it affects the game state for the duration of the game. But let's see. So far as my MVP in the sideboard, that's a tough one. Diabolic Edict has also been underperforming for me, but I have to say Ancient Grudge, just because of the amount of games where I just played against like Sword of Fire and Ice and I just didn't care.
Yeah.
It just didn't make a difference. Or I would see a Batterskull get slammed and they were in a position where they were behind and it just didn't matter. And the flashback is great. I'm actually running a Nihil Spellbomb over a Grafdigger's Cage right now, because in the past, I have run into situations where you wanted to flashback your Cabal Therapies or you wanted to flashback your Ancient Grudge and haven't been able to do that. And also I think that in the situations where you need the Nihil Spellbomb, or where you need a Grafdigger's Cage, a Nihil Spellbomb is not as impactful over a long period. It's usually what you need, especially if you're running the 2 surgicals.
Nope, I agree. Yeah, for certainly the reanimator strategies, and elves does not seem to be making up a huge portion of the room. So
thank God.
It sounds like a fairly safe gamble there. Well, congratulations on the list. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, or give any shout outs? Anybody who's helped you with the list?
Yeah, shout out to Ian Morency and Ian Carl, who helped me tune the sideboard a little bit. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, good luck.
Thanks, man.
Huh?
Me?
Yeah, you got first.
Interview for topic. That's gross.
Did he not make it?
Yeah,
Oh no.
So you might have just heard that, everyone listening at home. Grant didn't actually make top 8. He had the breakers at the beginning of the round, but then things changed. His opponents lost, the other people won, and he came in 9th or 10th.
Daggers.
So that's a whammy. I'm watching you interview Grant, and I'm like, man, Grant looks really happy. Maybe he doesn't know he didn't make top 8 yet. Yeah.
stifled.
Stifled at last again. So we're going to be sorting out the top 8 for you real soon. The top 8 is being congregated, assembled right now. We're going to get the deck list. We're going to review the players' decks, make sure they're legal decks and legal sideboards.
You have Smiley's deck list?
I think we have Smiley's deck
It's
list.
Sissio and Smiley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are good to go.
Oh, okay. So I am proved a liar yet again. We are good to go. We have 2 players we've already seen on camera today. Going to sit down soon, Josh Sissio and Tom Smiley.
All right, worlds collide here.
Leovolds versus Leovolds. Now, Tom we've had on camera about 3 or 4 times this weekend. A couple interviews, a couple matches. He's won them all. He's something like X and 3. I think we figured out 12-3 this weekend. Maybe 13-3, something like that. He's on a hot streak, so I have to imagine it favors him. He's playing the Stoneforge Mystic package, getting sort of Fire and Ice, Umazawa's G-Tape Batterskull. This Stoneforge backed up by Noble Deathrite True Name. A lot of 4-ofs in this deck. His opponent, Josh Sissio, what do you see in his deck? A lot less 4-ofs.
Yeah, he actually is at 61 cards,
Oh,
which kind
boy.
of gives a little bit of insight in terms of the number of singletons that he's interested in running. He's got some spicy ones. We're looking at Tombstalker, Abrupt Decay, a Singleton Lightning Bolt. He does have 2 Fatal Pushes and 2 Colgan's Command.
Wow.
And then for more singletons, he's got Diabolic Edict, Engineered Explosives. He really has a lot of optionality, which takes a card like Brainstorm and the 4 Ponders and really pushes kind of the possibilities with that card. The power difference between a Colgan's Command and a Lightning Bolt at the right time is very, very significant, and that's what he's going to look to capitalize on, is just get the full value out of all of these singletons in this matchup.
Right, this makes sense. I mean, Thomas's deck more consistent, some would argue more powerful, but at the same time, when Josh really needs to answer both a True Name and a Leovold at the same time, maybe he can draw an Engineered Explosives. That works, yeah. True Name does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. That is an option there. It does have the ability to deal with quite a bit, and the fact that he's not dead to True Name over the long term in the main deck is really powerful.
Yep, he also has Diabolic Edict, so he has 2 1-ofs that can answer that, the Edict and the Engineered. After board looking towards True Name, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I suppose he has Toxic Deluge.
Yeah, Deluge is the card that he may or may not bring in. It really depends on how he feels about this matchup. It's tough when they have all of the equipment, because anything that they can draw can become a legitimate threat on its own, so they don't necessarily have to overcommit to the board. They just need to kind of keep parity with you. It does complicate things. It's likely it would come in, but it would not be kind of shocking if it didn't. Fatal Push, very good there, getting the death rights off the board. Painful Truths, something that he could draw extra cards with. Really, you're not too worried about losing a little bit of life there. But really, Pyroblast, I think, is the type of card that's a real MVP versus cards like Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah.
The ability to counter that on the way down, it's such an investment. 3 mana doesn't sound like a lot to standard players, but that's really the top of the curve in these decks.
Oh, you mean the Leovold? Yeah, the Leovold and the True Name.
Yes, the ability,
yeah.
because you can deal with Leovold after he hits, and it's painful, but True Name, it's usually going to stick. I mean, he does have a couple of outs, but if you can Pyroblast or Red Elemental Blast that on the stack, that is a massive swing. They're really dedicating resources on their turn, potentially tapping out completely, and you're answering it for 1 mana, and then you also have a few more mana that you can use during their end step, untap, do more on your turn. Letting the shields down and have nothing to benefit from is really, really damaging.
Right. Now, Leovold, hard card to answer, but Josh Sissio actually has quite a few ways to deal with it. Even something like a Fatal Push, normally a 1-mana spell, can deal with that when combined with a fetch land. I think this is going to be an interesting match. I don't see any clear power disparity, any one card that's going to be a problem for